Good morning. Welcome to another session, another wonderful day of sessions at Housing Washington. I'm Carrie Williams. I'm with the Washington State Housing Finance Commission, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you today Leslie Goodlow, Equity and Business Operations Manager for the Portland Housing Bureau. And she will talk to us today about the Portland Housing Bureau's Northeast Housing Strategy as an effort to combat displacement. So Leslie, I'll turn the time over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you and good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Leslie Goodlow, and I have worked for the Portland Housing Bureau for a little over 9 years after 20 years of working for Multnomah County. In social services. I'm a social worker by education and most of my experience. I am the co-executive sponsor of the housing strategy and have been more or less the project lead since the inception of the strategy in 2014, as well as I staff the Oversight Committee. And so with that, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get started with my presentation. So I'm going to present for about 43 minutes and we will have time for questions at the end. So what I'm going to do today is give you an overview and some background on the housing strategy, the goals that were set in 2015 and the progress through most of this, the data will be progress through December of 2020. And then I'm going to talk about the preference policy and do a little demo of how people can apply for the preference policy through our online portal. And then give you some information about a study that's being conducted by Portland State University School of Urban Studies and our next steps and then questions. So this whole strategy, this whole project started back in 2013 when the then Portland Development Commission, or PDC, had made a deal with Trader Joe's to give them a piece of property in central Northeast Portland for a very low price. The property, I think, was worth several $1 million and they were getting it for around $500,000. Community members were outraged as there had been a promise to put housing on that property. And so 50 plus members of the community, primarily African-American folks, met with Mayor Charlie Hales, and through that process, he pulled $20 million from PDC out of their tax increment financing for the Interstate Urban Renewal District and gave it to the Housing Bureau to look into additional affordable housing, with the caveat that we would do a community process to decide how the money was going to be spent. We had 5 forums, community forums throughout Northeast Portland, and then one out in Gresham. And we sent out 77,000 postcards to folks in specific zip codes to try to reach them to get feedback. We had over 600 people participate in person, and then another couple hundred folks participate either through phone calls or emails or response to survey about what they would like to see prioritized with these funds. And through a process of working with community members, we had several committees that assisted us in narrowing down the priorities and how to allocate the funds. And in January of 2015, City Council adopted the housing strategy. During that process, we were trying to determine what area of Northeast Portland we wanted to focus on. And so we used census data beginning in 1970 through the 2010 census to determine which parts of Northeast Portland we could determine had been the most gentrified and where we could see the most displacement. So this slide shows you, so this first box is 1970, and the darker brown is a high concentration of African American. So that's up to 50% of the population in that particular area was African American. And then this is 1980, and you can see that this section here is still there. And then we've got more of the, I would say, the milk chocolate area here surrounding. And as you move to 1990, you can see that that darker chocolate has now extended up to the river, and there's more of this milk chocolate area. But then by the time you get to the year 2000, there's no longer that central kind of darker brown area that was here in inner Northeast. And by the time you get to 2010, there's no either the dark brown or that milk chocolate brown. So between 1970 and 2010, we have determined that upwards of 10,000 Black folks had been moved out voluntarily out of our, what we call the study area. Some additional demographic information for just to give you some background on Portland. We looked at the population shifts in 3 neighborhoods, and this information is in our state of housing report for the city of Portland. For interstate neighborhood, between 2000 and 2016, we saw approximately 3,000 Black people leave, and the median family income for that same time period dropped from 36,000 to 26,000, whereas for white families, it increased from 55,000 to 69,000. And you could see that the poverty rate in 2016 was 34% for Black families living in interstate. Similarly, in the MLK Alberta section or neighborhood, you saw almost a 6,000 person drop in population. Income change was not as drastic, decrease from 43K to 42K, and the poverty rate actually dropped in that neighborhood. But as you can see for the white people that lived in that neighborhood, their income increased from 70,000 to 89,000, and there was some increase in the poverty rate. And then the last neighborhood that is incorporated into the strategy is St. John's. We did see a slight increase of Black population, much less decrease in the median income, but still very low, and a significant poverty rate of 44%. Additionally, we looked at rates of renters versus homeowners. In 2013, we saw 42% of the white population in the city of Portland were renters versus 70% of the Black population. And in 2018, 43% of the white population and 72% of the Black population. And for homeowners, a slight decrease for white home ownership versus Black home ownership, which dropped by 5 percentage points. And in Portland right now, that's the lowest rate of home ownership since the 60s for Black families. So the housing strategy had 4 goals and then 2 policy implications. The first goal was preventing displacement. And out of the initial $20 million, we allocated $4 million to be split between home repair loans and home repair grants. Those grants and loans were available to homeowners with up to 80% median family income. Goal number 2 was creating new homeowners, and that was allocated $5 million. And that was split between down payment assistance loans. We predicted 40 families. And at that time, we were giving $60,000 in down payment assistance. And we have increased that now to $100,000 of down payment assistance that is 50% forgivable at 15 years. And then if they live in the house until 30 years, then it's totally forgiven. And then we set aside $2.6 million for new construction and development of new units, new homeownership units. Creating rental homes, $8 million. We projected 2 properties or 2 projects, and one of them came with land. And so you can see that the first project was $4.5 million plus the land, and then the second project was $3.5 million. And then the last goal was to purchase land then at a lower price that we could then develop at a later time. Also, one of the major pieces of the housing strategy was an oversight committee that would be different from other committees. There have been lots of plans, the Albina plan, the Emmanuel plan, even the interstate URA plan that included some kind of committee. And this time the committee would have direct reach to both the housing commissioner and city council to be able to hold the proverbial feet to the fire for both the city and for folks that we contracted with to spend these dollars. And then last but certainly not least was development of a preference policy to ensure that those folks that had been displaced would have first access to the units being built and the home ownership units. And so the preference policy applies to home ownership and to our rental units. So strategy 1, which is preventing displacement. As I said, we have home repair loans and grants. We began that process in 2015, and this chart shows you how many people per year received loans and then how many received grants each year. And so we work with community providers to resource these funds for the grants, and then for the loans, they get a loan from the Portland Housing Bureau. They are able to select their own contractor, and then we pay them directly. The loan is at no interest, and generally after 15 years, those are forgivable as well. This slide shows you the race and ethnicity by year of folks that have received both grants and loans. We were really trying to target BIPOC folks, BIPOC homeowners that still live in the district, to ensure that they had funds available to do necessary home repairs. If they'd had any citations from the city, that we made those repairs, and also to provide opportunity for folks to age in place. So things like renovating bathrooms with pull bars, putting ramps on houses, widening doors. Those were the types of repairs, and those loans go up to $40,000. whereas the grants were somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000. So generally for a grant, someone could have their house painted, possibly have a roof repaired or a new roof, depending upon the size of their house. They could have, again, a ramp put on. They could have landscaping, those kinds of things. And the grants are available more than once. So we do have some duplication. Some people have had a couple of grants, one per year, they're eligible to apply for. During 2020, we were able to take some federal dollars and do a pilot project to assist homeowners, particularly our senior homeowners, in maintaining their assets in their family with estate planning. And this was one of the things that both the community and our Oversight Committee had strenuously suggested to the Housing Bureau, that we provide some funds to assist families in keeping their houses in their family. And so that project started in spring of 2020. We've extended it through the end of this year because of COVID. But as you can see, 80% of the participants have been Black or African American, which was our target audience. Strategy 2, creating new homeowners. These are some pictures of folks that have became homeowners actually during the pandemic. We're very proud of our team working diligently to still assist people in becoming homeowners. So these two charts show the number of homeowners that we've created. And the first one is by funding source. And so these folks all came through preference policy. They applied during a couple of different rounds and are working either with PCRI, which is one of our community partners, or Portland Housing Center for their homeowner, their mortgage assistance, mortgage education to help them become mortgage ready. And so we have at this point created just shy of 70 homeowners plus that got some kind of funding. And then we have 10 people that came through the preference policy that were able to buy houses. They were able to buy a family house, or they took over a mortgage from a neighbor, and they didn't need any funding from the Housing Bureau. For home ownership, we are working with 80% or below AMI or MFI, median family income, unless the house is 3 bedrooms, and we can go up to 100% median family income for those mortgages. And I think one of the biggest things for us was that even with the pandemic, we were able to double the number of homeowners that we created in that year of 2020. So we went from 32 to 68 in 2020. This slide shows you both the race and ethnicity of our new homeowners. And again, the group that we were targeting was Black or African American, and then BIPOC. So 91% of our new homeowners are Black. And then one of the great things as well is that because of our partnerships with Habitat for Humanity and Portland Housing Center and Proud Ground, we've been able to create new homeowners with folks that have very low median family incomes or AMIs. As you can see, we had 28 or 43% of our folks are between 81 and 100%. We had 25% are at 61 to 80%. And then we have 23% that are below 60% AMI. And then a very small percentage that are at 101 to 120%. We received some funds from PDC or Prosper Portland, as their new name is, for providing down payment assistance to people above 100% of AMI. And so that accounts for that 9%. So through the strategy, we have also created 6 buildings, or worked to develop 6 buildings. We have 501 units total that are under the strategy. Through the course of the last few years, all of our tax increment financing falls under the strategy, whereas initially it was $20 million. We are now upwards of $96 million. That includes all of our funding for rental development, home ownership, and home repair. And so all of these buildings are subject to our preference policy, except for the units that have project-based Section 8. HUD does not allow dual preference. And so those units are rented separately through a process that's developed by each of the sponsors. Some of our, excuse me, our data to date, we had a goal of 380 units, and we ended up, as I said, with 501 spread between 6 buildings. We've been able to serve very low income families through a combination of project-based Section 8 vouchers and permanent supportive housing. 52% of the units are family sized with 2 or more bedrooms, and approximately 1,254 people are currently living in our buildings, preference policy buildings. Strategy 4 was land banking. The first piece of property that we purchased was a piece of property on interstate in Alberta. And we initially were going to use that property for home ownership. We had worked with Proud Ground to develop a condominium project with family-sized units, and COVID hit, the financing fell through. And so we had to discontinue that project, but now the property has been offered up through our Metro bond solicitation that we completed over the summer. And the announcement of the winning team will be within the next couple of weeks. We also purchased a piece of property from the Water Bureau in the city of Portland. Bureaus are required to offer surplus land to other bureaus before it's sold on the open market. And so we were able to negotiate with the Water Bureau to purchase that property, and then work with Prosper Portland to have it included in the district. And then the third piece of property that is now under our purview is what we call the Strong Family property. It is on Alberta between Williams and Vancouver. The family had owned that piece of property for a couple of decades. And one of the goals that we had was to work with longtime homeowners to create wealth within the community. And so we purchased that property from them. And in the next year, we will be doing a community engagement process for both the Strong property and the Cary Boulevard property to determine what exactly we put on those properties and what that looks like. We have targeted the Cary Boulevard property for home ownership, and the Strong property could be a combination of both rental and home ownership. This map shows you where we have invested based on the study area. The blue dots, if you can see them, are land bank properties. The green dots are home ownership developments in conjunction with Habitat for Humanity. And then the reddish pink dots are the rental developments that we have funded and that are subject to the preference policy. This table shows you our progress to date on our goals that we set in combination of all of the funds that we put into the preference or into this housing strategy. Rental development, we are, as you can see, we exceeded the goal. Home repair loans, we are just about halfway to goal. That has been significantly impacted by COVID and our inability to be able to go into homes for the last year and a half. Home repair grants, we are 98% to our 2022 goal. And for home ownership, we are 75% to our 2021 goal, which is 120 households. I mentioned earlier that we have a community oversight committee. That committee currently has 11 members. We can take up to 13. I'm currently recruiting for 2 more members. These are the names of the people that have participated on our committee over the last several years. Dr. Stephen Holt, who is the chair of our committee, he was with us through the entire process, beginning in 2014. And he agreed initially to 3 meetings, and here he is 6 years later, still working with us on this process. That website or the web address there is to the page on our website for the housing strategy and the oversight committee. We do record all of the meetings, and all of that is available on our website. The committee meets on every other month on the odd months, and the meetings are open to the public, but they are not public meetings. We have an agenda that's developed with the chair and with the leadership of the Housing Bureau. We regularly have updates from our community partners, from development partners, and from the Housing Bureau on things that are impacting Northeast Portland. So now the kind of the meat of what we're talking about today is our Northeast housing strategy. The preference policy. So the goals of the preference policy were giving preference based on the amount of urban renewal where applicants have lived, addresses the resulting generational displacement, preference given regardless of current address, and top priority to applicants whose family was taken by the city. This is the map of our study area. And as you can see that there are 4 colors. So I'll start with the 3-point area. That is areas of city condemnation. And so if you lived in any place where it was red, you got 3 points for your address for either you or your parent, grandparent, or guardian. If you lived in the yellow, that's urban renewal or the interstate URA, you got 2 points for yourself and 2 points for an address from your parent, grandparent, or guardian. The green is the Albina Community Plan, and you got 1 point for yourself and 1 point for your parent, grandparent, or guardian. And anything else, you get 0 points. So one of the things that is unique to our preference policy is that anybody can apply. And even if you get 0 points, you get on the list You're just the last to be contacted for available units or for our home ownership opportunities. So now I'm going to take you to our online preference policy site. So hopefully you all can see that. I'm going to ask my moderator if she can see. Carrie, can you see that? Did it change?
It did change, yeah.
Okay.
I can also just drop that link into the chat so that people can access it.
Okay. And so this is our online portal for people to apply for the preference policy. The application is very simple. We wanted to keep it as low barrier as possible. So again, it's some very general information, name, date of birth, year of birth, your current address, phone number, and email address. And then if you want to go on the list for openings in other rental buildings. And so I'm going to use some addresses that I know. So when you go to the search bar and you type in the address of where either you or your grandparent, parent, or guardian lived, and it will tell you how many points that address qualifies you for. So I'm going to put this as address for my grandparent, parent, or guardian.
Sorry, Leslie, what I'm still seeing is the slide that says the online preference policy website address.
Oh, okay. So let me stop share and then there we go. Share that. Now, can you see the?
Yes, that's the right screen.
Okay. So as I was saying here, you type in the address here on the search bar, it pops up in here, and then it will tell you how many points that you get for that address. And you can apply it either to yourself or to your parent, grandparent, or guardian. And so then it fills in on this side on the application. And then I'm going to put my second address. I don't know what that means. We'll try this again. Okay, I'm having problems, obviously. Sorry about that. I don't know why my address is not coming up. There we go. All right, so then I'm going to apply this to me. And so based on those two addresses, I have 6 points. And I would fill in the name of the ancestor that I'm using, what the relationship is to me, and fill out the rest of the application. You can also claim eminent domain if your parent, grandparent, or guardian, or your own home was taken by city action. We do have staff that are available to assist with kind of case managing folks and helping them find information in city archives, et cetera. So I'm going to go back to my slides. Okay. So since we started the preference policy, we have had 6 rounds. That's when we were doing them by building. So we would do an individual round when each building opened. And then we did 2 rounds for home ownership. We've had over 5,700 individuals unduplicated apply for preference. And the application that you saw there a moment ago is now open continuous. And so we are vetting applicants monthly to add to wait lists and send them to our building property managers. So one of the final things I'm going to talk about is a study being conducted by Portland State University, Dr. Lisa Bates and Dr. Ami Thurber, urban studies at Portland State on the preference policy. They had some broad goals of understanding the experiences and needs of those served by the policy, to provide assistance to both the Oversight Committee and Portland Housing Bureau in evaluating the policy and shaping ongoing implementation, to inform similar policies across the county, and to understand why people were applying, the experiences of folks that had applied, and then to gather recommendations for social, cultural, and civic economic well-being. Their initial review of the policy was for the first 3 buildings, and the average age was 43. 72% of the people that they interviewed had lived in the neighborhood on average, folks had lived 72% of their life in the neighborhood, and 65% had lived their entire life in the neighborhood. 84% were Black, 68% were women, and 54% had no children living in the home. And that's primarily because the first, one of the very first buildings had our smallest units. It was a building that was studios and 1 bedroom, so not really any family size units. That I'm sure will change in this next phase. So the second thing that they found was that place matters. 80% reported connection to the neighborhood was their primary motivation for applying. 80% also said that it was their best chance to move from a wait list into housing. Convenience was not their primary motivation. 91% agreed that the history of the neighborhood mattered. 87% felt they belonged in the neighborhood. And then 83% had friends and family that still lived in the neighborhood. Folks were reporting increases in well-being, 78% participating in arts and cultural events. And mind you, most of this study was done prior to COVID. 53% had increased their participation since moving back into the neighborhood. 56% were spending time volunteering. 24% of those folks had said that they increased their civic engagement since moving back into the neighborhood. And 50% reported getting to work and or school was more convenient. There also were risks and vulnerabilities reported. 48% agree that people who want to find a good job in the neighborhood, some are still precariously housed. Some people were still rent burdened, even though they moved into an affordable building. That there's needs for low-cost stores and amenities. The neighborhoods where these buildings are significantly gentrified. So there's lots of little shops and restaurants, but they are not really affordable for people that are living below 60% AMI. 70% agree that people with different backgrounds get along. 37% said that there was prejudice in the neighborhood, and 30% said that they'd experienced discrimination with the new businesses that were surrounding their buildings. So some of the takeaways from the initial analysis of the study: being able to live in a neighborhood where you have strong place attachments and social ties applies. Residents, oh, I didn't mean to click that back. Let me go back. Residents experience situations as improved, and they experience tensions and threats to well-being, and affordable housing is necessary but not sufficient in order to ensure well-being. And so they looked at all of the aspects of well-being and health for a community. And the intersection of those things, so quality of and access to resources, quality and access to physical and natural environment, degree and experience of equity and inclusion, degree and experience of civic participation, degree and experience of place, knowledge, and attachment, degree and experience of social connection, and the intersection of those things for individuals and the community to ensure that there's well-being and that people feel like they are welcome and that they can participate in what's going on in their community. And so as you can see that you can see that intersection of how all of those things impact this middle section. So looking ahead, they are continuing to work on the analysis of the first phase. They have done some reporting of their initial findings to the Housing Bureau, to the Oversight Committee, and to City Council. They have just begun the second phase with a grant that was awarded from Robert Wood Johnson in 2020. They put together an advisory group and a evaluation team to look at the 3 additional buildings and our future planning. And so that's the end of my slides. I am open to questions.
Thank you so much, Leslie. There's a lot of interest in your work, a lot of excitement going on. There's a couple of clarifying questions. Just you went through a lot of data and a lot of numbers and a few questions just to revise some of that. One is it true? Is it our understanding is that the program for creating new homeowners has been active just since the spring of 2020. Is that correct?
No. The home ownership program started in 2015, but we didn't have our first home buyers until 2018. Okay. What we found was that people that have been displaced, and as you could see from the median family incomes for Black families, that they would have significant barriers to becoming homeowners. So it took some of those folks that applied back in 2015 or early 2016, 2 to 3 years to be mortgage ready. So we didn't see our first homeowners until 2018.
Great, thank you for that clarification. The other clarifying question is, what portion of the new rental homes are affordable housing? You listed all those buildings and kind of gave us a map. Are those all affordable housing buildings? Yes,
all of those buildings are affordable. So 500 units. About 450 of them are subject to the preference policy. The other 50 or 60 have section project-based Section 8 vouchers.
Great. And then kind of to turn to more kind of philosophical, conceptual, how do you think, or how has the data shown, or how do you think that this preference policy supports closing the racial wealth gap, and how does it address racial disparities in housing?
Well, the project, when we started the project, we knew we were not going to be able to help everybody. I'll say that up front, that our goal was to provide assistance to hopefully about 1,000 people. And we knew that this was just a drop in the bucket for particularly the gap, homeownership gap between Black families and everybody else in the city of Portland. Black families currently are the lowest percentage of home ownership across the city. And so our hope was that we could begin this, and then as we worked through it, hopefully add additional funding, find other ways to support folks becoming homeowners, because we know that that's the quickest and best way to support generational wealth. We also, again, with the pilot project, in order to help people keep houses in their families, we all probably know someone whose grandmother had a, a will written on a piece of paper and a Bible, and never really did anything with it, or a person passes away and come to find out that they've got 2 mortgages and the family can't cover that, and so they end up losing the house. So I think those are the 2 major pieces. The affordable housing piece, the rental, that's not gonna create generational wealth. We know that, but the availability of affordable housing in Portland is so limited that we wanted this to provide opportunities for people to move back into Northeast Portland. We knew that thousands of people have been pushed out to East Portland, out to the numbers, as they say, out to Hillsborough, over to Vancouver, and they really wanted to live back in the neighborhood and have their kids attend the schools that they attended when they were kids. So hopefully that answers the question.
Very cool. This is such a unique project. Many people are commenting how incredible this is. Turning now to sort of the maybe unintended consequences or holes in the comprehensiveness. Have you seen any ways in which the preference policy might actually exclude some high need long-term residents, and kind of what circumstances might those be and how might they be addressed?
Well, I think initially it was challenging for people to find records, particularly for eminent domain claims. And that's why we had staff available to assist. Now, during COVID, we eliminated the need for people to provide that documentation to try to assist folks with getting into the housing. Again, this is a geographic preference, and although we are targeting Black and other people of color for these units, because we know that they were the most gentrified, the most displaced for a number of reasons, anybody can apply. And so I think if we could go back and look at how we did this, we did the best that we could to try to make it as simple as possible for folks to get that documentation. But, it's not an easy thing to find, what your grandmother's, get proof of your grandmother's address if she passed away 20 or 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the major challenge that we've found, but we've got great staff that work really hard to assist people, even if they can't remember the exact address. If they know what corner about where the house was, we've done research to help them find the address and determine if the house was taken by eminent domain or if the family lost the house for some other reason. So I think that's the toughest piece to this.
It's really incredible work. How was the process of kind of communicating all of this opportunity and the various points where people can engage with you? How was that process to get the word out about kind of the pilot program for the estate planning and all of the other various tools available to folks who might want to come back to the neighborhood?
Well, we have put together a really great engagement strategy. Again, we started back in 2014. We built up an extensive email list. Right now, we have close to 3,000 people on that list. The Oversight Committee meets, as I mentioned, every other month, and the meetings are available on our website. We do email blasts out to that web list, and it's posted on our website every month. We have a newsletter that goes out to give people information, as well as we have committee members that are parts of other committees that give updates on other projects that are happening in and around Northeast Portland. So I think that's one of the things I'm most proud of is that we've had great outreach. We've got great partners, the Multnomah County Library, Portland Public Schools, Self-Enhancement, the Urban League. We've worked with a lot of our community partners who share information that refer people to the preference policy list when buildings are open, so that we can get people into those units.
Great. Finally, folks are asking, including myself, is there a link to the Portland State University preliminary results, or any kind of place where we can watch for updates or watch for their final report to come out?
There is, the best thing I can tell you. So here's some information, and I'll share the slides.
Okay, great.
The housing strategy webpage has all of this information on it, and plus all of our past meetings. The Portland 2020 State of Housing Report. The Washington Post did an article about our preference policy earlier this year. And then PBS NewsHour also came out and did a report on the preference policy, probably 18 months ago, well, before COVID. And so those are some resources that folks can look at. I will reach out to Dr. Bates and get I don't know if she's published it yet, but her full report is available on our webpage.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. This has been really, really interesting. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here.
I think the session moderator, the session technology people will come and tell us when we're.
Thank you very much. I'll go ahead and